Where is it? Haven't had it out in so long. Finally need it again. That's right. Finally have a chance, an opportunity, a reason to get this spinny thingy back out. I could replace it with something fancier and better built, but come on, it's a cake topper. I love it. And because getting around to reviewing basically the return of Eaglemoss, sort of the whole FanHome thing. I'm a little late getting to it for various reasons. Part of it wasn't completely aware, whereas Master Replicas is doing other stuff like the Stargate now. The Star Trek license is falling here, and this is issue 3, the most recent, the USS Farragut of the Bellerophon type. And I didn't know what to expect exactly. I kind of figured it'd be Eaglemoss, but yeah, it's the same box in the mid-size range. And it even comes with a magazine again. I say that because the last Eaglemoss and Master Replica ships did not. Not that I really care a whole lot, but I mean, it's got to be added value. These are nice glossy pages. Why not? And the packaging is fine, but it's not really my deal. One thing I will give them credit, even though they put a little spot of tape on them now, and I don't mind that, just to let you know what you're getting is new. I know some collectors didn't like that. It's not a big deal to take it off. Otherwise, the packaging is resealable and in foam. But what about the model itself, which is really what I care about? So let's chunk the box. Although I will say, these are the only boxes, Hobby Master, Corgi, all that. I don't keep them. I have been keeping these since the beginning. And yeah, they're taking up a ridiculous amount of space in the attic. And here it is. Exact same stand style and everything. And you can tell it's an Eaglemoss style because there have been reports of the nacelles not coming attached, me included. Luckily, it's not because they come broken, at least in my case. It's just that FanHome, like Eaglemoss, just didn't use enough glue. The tabs were 100% intact, so all I had to do was put a dot of glue on the tabs and stick them in, no problem. And so they kind of self-center. Again, the stand is identical, although I believe some said that they are no longer numbering the undersides. Oh well, if they don't. I mean, again, not like I can see it. And finally, we have what is essentially a TOS era, even if it's Strange New Worlds interpretation, of a Miranda class. Although we don't call it a Miranda, we call it the Bellerophon. And this is, yes, the USS Farragut NCC-1647 from the TOS episode Obsession. Although, back in the day, everything was a Connie. I'm happy that it is getting more diversified. So we're going to talk about this history and compare it with, well, whatever I feel like today, because it's kind of a dreary day and I haven't done one of these videos in a while. So, yeah, we'll just hang out and chat starships. So with that, let's clear the deck. So here we go. As I said, the USS Farragut is part of the Bellerophon class, which is a medium cruiser, a deep space exploration cruiser. Very much a multi-role starship. Keep in mind the Constitution class heavy cruiser, much the same. And this uses elements from it, namely the saucer, although the nacelles are quite similar too. And we don't know when this class was introduced, but we can assume around the same time as the Connie, which seems to have come out around 2240. We know that the original Enterprise 1701 was launched in 2245, and we know that the Farragut herself was launched in 2243. So sometime in the 2230s, maybe just a little before the Connie. That seems to be the thing, but get that idea. So by the 2260s, it's not a new class, but it's been space tested and whatnot. And the overall length is stated to be 316 meters, which isn't the worst, but what I've been doing with the Discovery era and of course Strange New Worlds by extension era ships is cutting that by 2/3 down, and that gives us a length of just under 211 meters, which actually tracks really well with both the Connie and Miranda as we know it. And the stated beam width is just over 200 meters. Scale that down, that gets us to about 133, 34. And the stated height is 68 meters. If we scale that down, it gets us to just under 45.5 meters. All works. And we know that it has quite the crew based on the TOS episode Obsession of roughly 400. We could kind of go and say like 380 or something, but the original Connie was about 430. And like I said, to be fair, their saucers are basically the same size. This just has a tucked in secondary hull as opposed to expanded out. The original Connie, most sources say, has 21 decks, although some boost that up to 27. There's a lot of discrepancy. This one, I'm going to say 12 decks. That seems to work well with an average deck height of 3 meters, so 36 meters. That gives us 11 meters to hang down for the nacelles. Of that, 7 or 8 would be in the primary saucer, and the others would be in the secondary hull and the 2 decks of the bridge module itself. We know that it's capable of reaching warp 9 old scale, but has a cruise of warp 6. We can imagine that the interesting configuration of the nacelles might give it that kind of burst high warp speed, because that's pretty equivalent to the Connie, maybe even a little bit faster in short bursts. It has photon torpedoes and phasers, and the phasers seem to be of the kind of turreted style we see going back to the early 23rd century. Of course, it has deflector shields, transporters. Does it have a shuttle bay? I like to think so, but it's going to be very small at the rear, kind of under the impulse manifold, at the very back of the small engineering hull, probably just enough for work bees, shuttle pods, maybe one emergency shuttle. But by this era, transporters are very heavily used. And it's always possible this one was capable of landing, although I don't know. That's kind of meh. Certainly earlier ships were capable of landing before the NX, also the Walker class. This is before transporters were 100% relied upon, though. It's just a very versatile workaday vessel. Several were created and still in service by the TOS era. Let's take her off the stand. It actually is gripped very well. And the main saucer is die-cast metal on this, with the nacelles and part of the secondary hull being plastic polymer. And then we have a kind of squashed TOS style deflector. Fun fact, when the original Connie was dreamed up in 1964. It was not a deflector. It was actually a communications disc antenna. Things change. In fact, the original Connie was meant to be much smaller, and over the years, even well before the Abrams verse and Discovery, it's been slightly retconned up and up, even though the original is said to be just under 290 meters today. A lot of people believe, kind of looking at measurements, that 320 or even 350 meters would be better. A lot of clapback. That's why I said even this one being 316 wouldn't be completely out of the realm. Not considering we know it has a crew of 400. What we know about the Farragut, it was in TOS Obsession. Well, we found out that it was Lieutenant Kirk's first deep space assignment out of the Academy. Interesting that how some come out of the Academy as ensigns, some as lieutenants, but chances are they were instructors or maybe did some others, closer to Earth assignments before finishing up. Anyway, he was assigned this, and presumably, if not a 5-year mission, quite long. That would have been around 2254 when he received this assignment, taking it in 2255. He was assigned to the phaser control room, and that would result in the incident at Tycho 4 in 2257 with the cloud monster and all that killed half the crew, including the captain. I'm not sure how that keeps happening. After 40 or 50 folks die, you think you would quit doing the same thing. Anyway, part of the episode, we can also presume that this was probably involved in the Klingon War of 2256, but who knows? Some people don't even want to acknowledge it. That's fine. But we know the Farragut would soldier on. We see this, or a member of this class, at Space Station Starbase 1 in 2259. Later on that year, we're informed that Kirk is being promoted. He's been frocked, as it were, for first officer, although he probably won't actually assume the role until 2260. Maybe that's the end of this one's first 5-year mission that he's on board. That would gel with the timeline 2255 to 2260. Presumably it's former first officer who took over after Captain Garvik died in 2257, was moving on to bigger and better things, and new captain coming on board, and Kirk would take over as first. And I believe Kirk would stay on board the Farragut through 2263, when Captain Pike would suffer his beep chair accident. Then Kirk would be tapped to become commanding officer of USS Enterprise, considered a more prestigious ship than the Farragut. That's also why I kind of like that this is its own class and type, as opposed to just being another Constitution, as it was in, assumed in all the TOS era. I mean, I love the Connie, but in the TOS era, it was kind of assumed that all Federation ships were Connies. I understood on screen why this was the fact, but in reference materials and everything, it's like, come on, diversify. Starfleet's not going to have 12 starships and that's it. That makes no sense. So, yeah, having this as kind of a intermediate works for me just fine. So, Kirk would move from this to the Enterprise in 2265, and there we have it. At least for the standard Prime timeline. And yeah, I have no problem making Strange New Worlds canon, as it were. I mean, after all, what is canon? I think people get a little too... It's all fiction, guys. But it's also all fun. Back on the stand, it's got a nice upward rake. I like that. It takes up less shelf space and stays in the clips better because it slides back. Typically, these are pretty good at staying in their stands, but not perfect. Another kind of personal story. Years ago, in 1991, the 25th anniversary game came out, and a friend was playing it, and he said that there was a single nacelled starship in there. It was the one that had been taken over by, I believe it was Orion pirates or some pirates, second or third mission. And on the screen, it looked like it was just a single nacelle because you saw it straight on from the side. And with the Saladin class and the Hermes class being things, I thought, okay. He was kind of bullshitting me. It was a dual nacelle, although they were more spread out than we see here. Kind of the earliest idea I had for a TOS Miranda. Of course, there was the Ptolemy class, which was a tug. All kinds of fun stuff like that. So it's nice to have one, and I believe this, along with the Archer class, were the first truly new ship class models seen in Strange New Worlds. Otherwise, we had carryovers like the Disco era Constitution USS Enterprise. So it's nice that they gave this to us as issue 3. By the way, anyone watching, if you've got issues 1 or 2, let me know. I kind of missed out on those and wouldn't mind picking them up. But things are kind of odd right now with the FanHome website. Surprise, surprise, right? No, I like it, and I think that the design works well. It's just a good workaday Starfleet starship. But with that, let's compare and give a little historical context to where this fitted in, what it replaced, what replaced it, contemporaries, and of course, the Connie herself. I thought it would be good, and let's begin with comparing with the Kelvin type. Yeah, gotta bring in JJ a little bit. I actually kind of like this ship. It's got a couple of strange nods, but it's more or less faithful in a lot of ways. In fact, you could say this is a Hermes or a Saladin type or variant. Edison has also been said as the class type. And kind of comparing to this, like I said, this is a medium. This would kind of be considered more of a light, long-range cruiser, exploration, and colony vessel. Sorry, my cord's a little wonky here. And if we DJJ the Kelvin, it's a little over 315, 320 meters long. But of course, a lot of this is the single nacelle. Now, some don't like single nacelles. I do. I think they're fun. And this has been something that's been in canon since the good old FASA days. So, yeah, of course, the Freedom class. And a lot of your length is actually this nacelle, which you could say it's kind of a double, front to back 2 if you want. Bizarre collector. Same type of dish, everything. The crew of 800 is ridiculous on this. I think in my notes I just pared it down to say 200. But this was introduced around the turn of the century, around 2205. Kelvin herself was launched around 2225. And the class seems to have been phased out in the 2240s into the 2250s. And I would imagine that the Bellerophon type helped kind of replace it, along with, like I said, Hermes, Saladin, other 2 nacellers. But yeah, I can definitely buy these being part of the same fleet. Also keep in mind that while the Farragut was made at the San Francisco shipyard, that doesn't mean every ship is, or every design came from there. Some could have come from Mars, Utopia, Planitia. Others could have come from Andor or other, Federation members. So I think there's more room for experimentation than folks give Starfleet credit. Moving on, let's just compare with the Constitution, or rather the Disco Strange New Worlds version. Again, it's stated to have a length of about 442 meters, doing the 2/3 rule. It actually works out really well. That gets us just shy of 295 meters, which, considering the kind of TMP style swept back pylons, meaning a little bit longer, and the secondary hull looks a little longer. Yeah, a little bit longer seems to help. Keep in mind the TMP was said to be about 305 meters itself. It also seems a little squatter, which makes sense to me. I don't see the whole long gooseneck, sure, but also it fits in better with the Bellerophon class. I think the two work well together. They have similar deflectors, just a little more smushed on the smaller cruiser, and kind of same goes for the nacelles. They seem maybe a little more massive here, but definitely the same styling. The saucer definitely seems the same. The impulse manifold, a little different, but that's okay. And no questions about where this shuttle bay is at. I have feelings about the little strip on the back. On the other hand, having a flat area to kind of land on or work on, do EVAs from, makes sense. And there's plenty of discrepancies with the Connie, even going back not just to the 90s and rebirth of Trek, but even the 70s. Heck, the original Cage had a crew of just over 200, and then by the TOS proper, it was over 400. And that's honestly because the Enterprise got bigger. Originally, I think it was supposed to be like 110 meters, then 150, then 200, and yeah, eventually we kind of get to the 289 number, but even that's just kind of done. As I said earlier, how many decks? So nothing was ever set in stone. By the way, in the Cage to the Where No Man's Gone Before pilot, the way they made it look larger is they put a smaller bridge module and a smaller deflector dish on, but they didn't really change the windows or anything, so that's why the windows look like there aren't near as many decks in the saucer, but to have room for everything, there kind of have to be. But I could definitely buy these as being from the same fleet. There's also the very similar Sombra class, which is essentially a Connie, but seems to have a smaller crew and maybe a little bit faster. I think it might be more of a kind of a cargo transport variant, and I don't have a problem with that either. You know, using a basic space frame and customizing it. And I know in Strange New Worlds they further refined the design a little bit. That's fine, sure. And you also have to keep in mind that in the 60s they were working with what could be made on a TV budget using practical materials, wood and styrene and all that. I think there's even a quote from Roddenberry saying that if he could have, essentially, the Enterprise would have looked more like the motion picture from the get-go. And that's actually why I like this design. I like the swept back pylons and everything. But what do you think? Either way, definitely could see all three of these being in the same fleet. Again, keep in mind the Connie, even though it's still the jewel of the fleet in the 2260s, it's not the youngest. Not by a long shot. But it is very modular and updatable. So what else? What other ships do we see in Strange New Worlds that would serve alongside the Farragut? For what it's worth, Farragut, named after Admiral David Farragut of American Civil War Damn the Torpedoes fame. And another vessel with good naming pedigree that I just like. The Shepherd class, named after the first American in space, and the USS Gagarin, and I think you know who that's named after, is one of the ships of this type. They kind of got me on the naming. Yes, it's very disco, I get that. But we do see one of these docked at Starbase 1 alongside a Bellerophon, so it's one of the disco ships that is carried over. And it's said that this is a kind of a test bed vessel for new technologies, new warp systems, hence the long nacelles. Yeah, that gives it a pretty good overall length too. I think it's around 500 meters in stated canon, so if you break that down, it gets to about 335 meters in the 2/3 rule I like to use. But again, a good chunk of that is the nacelle, and of course a very flat ship. And the nacelles are ever so slightly underhung, so kind of that medium cruiser styling. But this does seem to be a fast, rapid response vessel, experimental, from the early to mid 23rd century. Probably an alternative design to the Bellerophon, which is, how the real world works too. A lot of times nations will have a couple of designs they'll put into production. Britain especially did this a lot. Kind of see which one works out. So I'm okay with it. Moving right along, we have another one that's been a background ship in Strange New Worlds at least once, the Malachowski class. This is a relatively small ship. Even with the stated length, it's well under 300 meters, and if I do my 2/3 rule, it's about 185, with a good chunk of that being nacelle. But it's definitely the underslung version. It has a deflector placed very squat, like the Bellerophon. Definitely a light cruiser style, if even a heavy frigate. And let's just say a competing design, or maybe the Bellerophon's meant for deep space, long duration. This is meant for more short range, hence the different construction, what have you. Taken in a vacuum, I like the design. And if some say, well, it's a little too futuristic, looking for the future of the mid-22nd century, sure, why not? But that's okay. And one more underslung, the Hoover class. This is more of a medium cruiser, and it's a little bit longer in universe compared with the Bellerophon, about 220, 230 meters, and has a relatively thick saucer, so it's probably got more internal volume, but it does have kind of the squat nacelles. This looks more like I'm not saying it is, but like a tugboat. It looks squat and durable, got a very pronounced shuttle bay in the back. This looks like a work ship to me. So, totally different role. And more than the Miranda, I would say this resembles the later Nebula class, including the edge of the saucer and the tucked up and the big, relatively speaking, engineering hull. I don't believe this has been seen in Strange New Worlds, but I just I just decided to bring it out. Why not? Because again, I do like the design. Take it in a vacuum. This one probably would work better as a more future ship. In fact, it has, I believe, a version of this. The Edison class has been seen in Pickard Season 3. See, this one likes to wiggle off its stand. This is one that I think they could have done a little better stand on. Either tilting it back more or something. Or maybe clipping it further forward would have worked. I think they tried to make it look better versus functional. So, yeah, props to the Farragut for staying on its stand better than some of these. But what do you think? And there you have it. Keep in mind, I don't know what ships look like unless I can get a model. So when Eaglemoss went under a couple of years ago, it was kind of meh to me. It depressed me because I knew I wouldn't be able to get an idea of the new Picard ships as of Season 2 and 3, Strange New World ships, except for this one, which is technically a Discovery anyway, we didn't have. And whatever else might come, Lower Decks included. We had a couple of their ships come out, but that's it. So we'll see how this FanHome does. But right now, the page is online, but not taking new orders. Hopefully, they say they'll be back in February. But if anyone's got a line on the Titan A, let me know. But no, I like it. It's very Eaglemoss, which doesn't surprise me. For good and bad. But overall, I think Eaglemoss are fine. Sometimes I do miss the small ones because we could get more cheaper. On the other hand, it seems like a little more effort's put into these. What I have discovered, I don't really like the XL size. I like this size just fine. The 5 to 8 inches. But, I don't know, something about the XLs just don't quite trip my trigger. But what do you think? It's been a long time since I've done a Star Trek ship video, and so that's why I wanted to give some extra effort on this one. I wasn't sure about the kind of swept-in nacelles, but they're okay. They're at least different. That's one reason I showed you the other disco under nacelle ships to kind of explain why they went a little different route. And I think it works kind of with how the pylons are on the Constitution. They're kind of a mirror of that. And the Farragut, technically going back to TOS, and of course its namesake, the Nebula class Farragut from Generations, and I think there's a Excelsior Farragut too. It's definitely a ship name that pops up frequently in Star Trek. So, cool that they did it as issue 3. I'll be curious to see how long they'll keep doing Federation ships before they try doing Alien. That said, I do know that Alien ships never sell as well as Federation. However, there's at least one group of Alien ships that I do really want to get. I hope they do it. Romulan. Give us the flagship at least, or any other Romulan ships. And of course this one is particularly relevant because it went up against these two in the alternative 2266. Completely owning the Farragut and doing some damage to Enterprise too. And this one here, which was from Picard, is how you do an update to a classic design right. The Katinga is another good example of how to update like the D7, but yes, the original Romulan Bird of Prey model was very basic, and this keeps all the right lines, and they reused it in Strange New Worlds alternative future end of season 1, and that was a very, very good call in my opinion, because it was underutilized in Picard. But yeah, it's good that FanHome is picking up where Eaglemoss left off, and I wish them the best of luck. I really look forward to new ships. I've kind of missed picking them up over the years. But let me know what you think. And if you like the Strange New Worlds or even Discovery designs, or maybe you're just a TOS purist, which, okay, but that's pretty limiting considering the only Starfleet ship we actually see in the original series is the Connie. Yes, I know in TOS Remastered there's a couple more, but yeah, those are updates too. So I'm actually happy the 23rd century is getting more ship types. And I think with these two, they've really narrowed in on doing an update right, where it keeps the original look more or less, but doesn't look like something made out of wood and styrofoam. With that, this is Misha. Catch you very soon next time.